Swami Kriyananda. Today's topic is, does Satan exist? Truth is one and eternal. Realize the oneness with it in your deathless self within. The Bible tells us in the Gospel of St. Matthew, then after baptism was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. To most modern minds, this passage seems quaintly obsolete. Psychologists would say, and have said, that the temptation of Jesus, if it occurred at all, was purely psychological. They call it a projection of desires lurking in his own subconscious mind. The subconscious plays a strong part, certainly, even if not a unique one, in any testing that spiritual seeker must undergo. The Gita, in dealing with this undeniable reality, quotes Arjuna in the 3rd chapter, and then Sri Krishna's reply. Arjuna says, "Tell me, teacher, by what force doth man go to his ill, unwilling, as if one pushed him on that path?" And Krishna replied, "Desire it is, passion it is, born of the darknesses, which pusheth him, mighty of appetite, sinful and strong as this, man's enemy." Yet even Krishna describes passion as born of the darknesses. The fact is, as Yogananda wrote in Autobiography of a Yogi, all thoughts vibrate eternally in the cosmos. Thoughts are universally and not individually rooted. A truth cannot be created, but only perceived. Psychology, yes, but psychology attuned to currents of consciousness that pervade the entire universe, attracted by each of us according to our own personal inclinations. Yogananda, quoted in the Path, said, "I used to think Satan was only a human invention, but now I know and add my testimony to that of others who have gone before me, that Satan is a reality. He is a universal conscious force whose sole aim is to keep all beings bound to the wheel of delusion. We should take pains then to attract uplifting currents of universal consciousness and to avoid interacting with the negative, attracting that disease that it is, which can infect our thoughts even while it leads us to believe that our thoughts are purely our own. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to me." Well, it's been quite an August for Dharmadas, and we did a lot of traveling to visit his family. We went to the East Coast with his family, where we got stranded for 3 days. And we joked that we had a wonderful vacation in Newark, New Jersey, the airport. And then we came home from that, and Dharmadas had the surgery to take the plate out of his arm. So congratulations to Dharmadas for playing a chant. And a college-level chant at that. And he is also without the neck brace, which is a joy. And then we had several guests from India. You got to see Aditya, Swami Aditya. And one of the things, when he gave Sunday service last week, and one of the things that he told us afterward was that even though he's never given Sunday service here before, he felt
attunement of Ananda. He said everyone that he met was like family. And we have often noted that. We've been to many places and mixed with many devotees, to paraphrase Swami Song Brothers. But always it has been going to Ananda. It's always the same vibration. We often would joke that somehow we'd get in trouble and we'd be sent to Siberia. And we'd have to start the Siberia Center. And then we visited Siberia. And they were opening a center, so we dedicated the center. I guess some words come true. You have to be careful what you say. But even in Siberia, we found the sweetest devotees. Remember the purification ceremony that we used to do before COVID, and we're thinking about redoing it again? It would happen after the fire ceremony. We've been having a meditation now instead of the purification ceremony. But it's a very sweet ceremony, and I remember especially with those devotees in Siberia that they were so moved by it that many of them wept. It was so inspiring for them, and so cleansing, and so healing, and so deeply spiritual for them that they wept. So this reading today gives us a very powerful piece of advice to leave aside all negativity, all negative emotions, all fear, and align ourselves with uplifting consciousness. We also, in August, went to visit Ananda Village for Jyotish's 80th birthday. Jyotish is now the spiritual director, along with his wife Devi, of Ananda worldwide. So this was a very important milestone in his life. And it was, shall we say, a bit daunting because there were hundreds and hundreds of people there. And maybe that sounds like a lot of fun to most people, but for a sort of reserved, quiet person, it was a little bit much. And so as we were walking down to the Hermitage Garden, where all the tulips are, where people visit and see the tulips in the spring, it was in that garden. I remembered that Swami used to say to us, before you go to the Crystal Hermitage for any event, stop by the chapel. And those of us who've been here a long time remember that request. Stop by and meditate for a moment before you go into that outward energy. So now it sounded like a good idea to me. And I stopped by the little chapel for a moment. And I very strongly felt the trepidation is not spiritual. The trepidation is the negative energy. Being afraid is Satan. Let go of that. And I strongly felt, live in your heart, not in the fear. And so we proceeded down. We had this very sweet little Japanese lady. Was she Japanese? Or she was Chinese. She was Chinese. That we had met at breakfast or something, and she needed a ride, and she was bliss incarnate. She was so happy to be in Ananda, so happy to have found these teachings. She was just bubbling over with this joy of meeting everyone for the first time, and she had her phone with her, and she was making a documentary. And she was taking video of everything and everybody, and she showed us this other documentary that she'd made on Facebook. So it was real. She was really documenting all of this. But I thought, that's the joy that we need to live in. That joy of first discovery. The joy of being completely open and completely receptive to everything that God is giving us and taking it like a little child. So we had her in tow and we brought her down to the party, and immediately it was like, well, I'm sure many of you have experienced this. It's like being in a pinball machine. You know, you're just greeting everybody and being hugged and all of this energy. And it's a little easy to get overwhelmed by that. But I remembered, and I kept saying to myself, live in your heart, not in the fear. And that goes for everything, not just a joyous party for those of us who aren't much into parties, but it's for everything. It's for going into the doctor's office, and you don't know what you're going to hear. And it's going into the boss's office to find out we don't know what. It's all of those intimidating situations where we have to step out in faith and not be held back by Satan. We had a marvelous dinner with some of the people from one of the centers, little meditation groups on the East Coast, while we were at Ananda. And this lady that we met many years before and we hadn't seen for a long time was telling this story about when she was a little girl. And we had all been sharing about how growing up, many of us didn't feel like we fit. Like they were just a little bit at odds. It wasn't really our world, you know? It was like, where am I? And she told the story of being a little kid, like 4 years old, watching television, Sesame Street, and it was a game of what doesn't fit with this. And there was a knife and a fork and a spoon and a plate. And the plate didn't fit with the other things. And even as a little girl of 4, we think, I'm the plate. And as so often happens in spiritual satsang, we started coming to the idea that, yeah, we don't fit in this world because we know there's something more, there's something missing. And as soon as we start feeling spirit, as soon as we start connecting with spirit, then lo and behold, we're all connected. And that is why Ananda feels like Ananda, why Aditya can come from across the world and feel the same vibration, because we are all connected by spirit. And if we feel alone, if we get into feeling I'm completely alone, nobody's here for me, I've been abandoned, all those different feelings, that's Satan. That's the negative force. That's Maya, delusion. Maya is an Indian Sanskrit word for delusion. It means the measure, it means the one that separates, the one that makes us feel alone in the world. There's that beautiful story. I've told it 1,000 times, but you're going to hear it again. The devotees are sitting with the guru, and the guru gives them each a piece of fruit. And he says, okay, now go out anywhere on the grounds or in the forest, anywhere, and eat this fruit where no one can see you. And so they all go out, and they find lonely places by the seashore and in the mountains, wherever, where no one is around. And they eat their piece of fruit, and they go back to the guru. And everyone comes back except this one devotee. And everybody's starting to get worried because it's getting dark, and where is he? And finally he comes back, and he puts the piece of fruit at his guru's feet and said, I'm sorry, Master, but no matter where I went, those divine eyes were looking at me. We are never alone. There's no point in hiding. You can run, but you can't hide. There's no point in even trying, because God is already in here. He knows every thought. He knows every feeling. There's no point in hiding. Lay it all out. And amazingly, you will find answers. Direction will be given. You are not alone. God is with you in every breath. This same friend at the little dinner we had at the Expanding Light was also telling a wonderful story. And we joked about today's topic because she had to give the same Sunday service. So we both agreed that this was the perfect story for that day. And she said it was Guru Purnima, which is a time of giving thanks to the Guru, of worshiping the Guru, and making special reverence to the Guru. And in our case, it's all 5 gurus. So here she was. She had to set up for an evening program of Guru Purnima, setting up 5 altars, all the chairs, all the flowers for people to offer, prasad after the program, all these different things that she had to do. And she had lined up people to help her. And the day of the event, every person was no longer available. They all left her all by herself. And her first reaction was, I've been abandoned. Nobody takes this seriously. Why am I always the one to have to do everything? Why can't people step up and help me? All these thoughts were in her mind. Satan, negativity, feeling helpless, feeling like nobody cares. And then she said, I got this surge of energy. And I realized, if no one will come with me, I will go on alone. And so she had a wonderful time all by herself, doing all the flowers for all the altars, decorating them all. She said she got into a very high state. And then Ram came to do the program, did all the chanting for it. Ram is going to come in a couple of weeks to do a little concert here on a Friday night. And he was there and he did the chanting and everything was beautiful. And she realized that it had been a test of Divine Mother to see if she would crumple under the responsibility or if she would rise to the occasion. So that is an example of Satan in our lives. Let's not let him get the best of us. Let's always serve with joy and be open and receptive to God's energy and love pouring through us. It's trying to in every moment. Let's open the floodgates and let his energy in.
There's a story that perhaps some of you read in high school, a short story by Stephen Vincent Benet called The Devil and Daniel Webster. I see a few heads nodding out there. It's a delight, by the way, and if you haven't read it, I would recommend it. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes to read. It's not very long. And you can just find it by searching on the internet. It's public domain. But anyway, in this story, there's a farmer in New Hampshire named Jabez Stone. And Jabez might as well be Job, because ain't nothing gone right for Jabez. His horse has got something wrong. He broke his plowshare on a boulder. You know, when other farmers nearby have stones in their field, he gets boulders in his. His kids are sick. You know, it's less like nothing's working for you. If he plants potatoes, they get the blight. If he plants corn, they get borers. You know, it's just like, it's all wrong. And one fine day, he's just had enough, and he says, you know, for 2 cents, I would sell my soul. And then he gets this kind of queer feeling inside, because, and that night comes a knock at the door, and there's this very distinguished visitor, and he says, so you said, you know, what are we going to do about this? And they draw up a contract, and he gets, 7 years or something, and his luck completely turns. So, now the field is prosperous, and the kids are healthy, and et cetera, et cetera. They're talking about having him run for office, in the local area. Well, but then the time is ticking down, and the guy is starting to get very anxious, because he knows when that clock runs out, he's in big trouble. And comes that last week, and he finally decides, I got to do something about this. And he goes to Daniel Webster, who, for those of you who remember your American history, was a famous orator, and he ran for president, and he never quite made it into that office, but he was one of the most famous people in America for his oratory powers, and just for sort of embodying the spirit of America. And anyway, Daniel isn't typically practicing law anymore in his career, but he agrees to take the case because it's so unusual. And so they encounter the man who calls himself, he said, I've been known by lots of names, but for this evening and for this area, I'm known as Scratch. So they're dealing with Scratch. And they go back and forth looking at the contract. They both have copies of the contract. There is no wiggle room in this contract. I mean, it's over. He got his 7 years of good luck. He owes his soul, and that's the end of that. Daniel says, I demand the right of every American to a trial. And Scratch says, okay. And Daniel goes on and says, and I don't care who the jury is, they can be the living or the dead. And, Scratch's eyes light up a little bit. Okay, well, we'll do that then. So immediately the door flies open, and 12 of the ugliest, gnarliest, most traitorous old codger, long since dead, come into the room, the pirates and the traitors and etc. And he gets to try his case in front of this jury and live by the result. And he's preparing, Daniel Webster is preparing his case, and he's getting wound up, because he's going to really deliver it. And he sees their eyes glittering. And he realizes at that moment that they're not just coming for Jabez Stone's soul, they're coming for his as well. And he realizes, I can't talk that way. I can't use the fire and anger and the, essentially the devil's weapons against him. That's going down the wrong trail, kind of like what Nirmala was saying. Instead of operating in that way. So he takes a completely different approach. And he talks about the good earth, and he talks about the things that people love and the things that get, a child to get up in the morning, and etc. And he gives this long talk, and it's like the whole atmosphere changes. And he finally finishes his case, and the jury goes off to decide, and they come back, and they find for Jabez Stone. And then, in typical adorable fashion, now that he's won his case, he's sort of got Scratch right where he wants him. So he just grabs onto Scratch and says, "You're mine now. I'm going to make you draw up a contract for me saying you're not going to mess with anybody in New Hampshire ever again. If we want to raise Hades, we can do it on our own without your help." And besides that, I've got a ram named Goliath who can butt through an iron door, and I want to see him chasing you around my farm. Anyway, so it goes on for a little bit, but it's very sweet. But what struck me about it is that critical moment in the trial, or before the trial, where he's about to speak, and he sees the eyes glittering, and he suddenly figures out, oh, I can't use what I thought I was going to use. I can't go down that trail. And that's something that we all have to learn in our lives, is when is it heading, in the reading today, Swami talks about and quotes Yogananda saying, thoughts are universally and not individually rooted. And it is so easy to think, no, but my thoughts are my own. Whatever I think, that's me. That's, I dream up what I think. And we don't realize that we are little radio handsets that are picking up broadcasts that are going on in the universe. And we tune into one or we tune into another. And it's, in a way, it's easier to see this now because, yes, there are lots of radio stations. Not that hardly anybody seems to listen to the radio anymore. But there's a bazillion websites out there, and you can just go drill into whichever one you're interested in. And it's like, whoa, you can find the consciousness you want to invite into your heart and into your mind and just keep going with it and be blessed or cursed as a result of it. And this chant that we sang earlier gives a helpful key to the whole process. And I said it was college level because there's terms in it that are not familiar. What the heck is a wishing tree? Some of you I'm sure know what it is, but in India, traditionally, a wishing tree is you sit under this tree and you make a wish and it comes true. And what is pranayam? Pranayam is the wishing tree because if you have enough energy, you can basically make anything come true. But do you necessarily want it to come true? That's the part where you have to learn, they said this, the old saying, be careful what you wish for because it might come true, or in fact it will come true. And that's the lesson for us to learn, and that's the lesson of pranayam. And I appreciated that Swami paired generosity with this topic of Bible and Gita, because even though it may not seem like a natural segue, that's where the energy rises. Pranayam means you're guiding the energy, you're raising the energy. And that's where we are released from the hold of that downward force. We can think of Satan just as gravity. It's the gravity that's tying us to the material world. And saints who levitate have overcome that gravity by an upward force. And, we visited St. Joseph of Cupertino in Assisi, who was a levitating saint. And he would go, he was a very inconvenient saint because he would do the Mass and he would be up on the ceiling. And I mean, it just, it really disturbed the system because not everybody could go up on the ceiling when they were leading the Mass. And, you're kind of up against a comparison of, well, look at him, we want him. And so they imprisoned him. I mean, they literally put him in some rooms in the monastery in Assisi, and we meditated there. It was very uplifting. But
Literally.
No pun intended. There's a story that a Protestant came to expose this charlatan, and Joseph grabbed onto him while he was leading the Mass, grabbed onto this guy, and they both went up to the ceiling. And it was said that he went up a Protestant and he came down a Catholic. So, anyway, but that overcoming of the gravitational pull, it's not automatic, and it's sort of with us all the time. I mean, in a sense, we are the gravity. It's not even just that the earth is pulling us. It's like literally built into our bodies. And yet, pranayama just shows us, okay, that's real. Yes, I have divine consciousness in me, and I also have this negative consciousness that is a potential, but it doesn't have to be an actualized potential. And if I raise my energy, then guess what? The consciousness is going up. But it takes that willing effort, and that is the sort of the key to that chant. And I love that the chant finishes with this beautiful, to me it's like the chant gives us two options. The two options are, you don't have to fear anything anymore. I mean, that's pretty good. That like works for me. That's not a bad place to be. You don't have to fear anything anymore. Or alternatively, night and day in thy joy, O my Lord. I could work with that too. Those are both pretty good alternatives. Pick the one that works for you. Pick both if they both work for you. But it's like we can just infuse that into our consciousness. And then all this commotion of, what are we up against? It's not like we have to, invite Daniel Webster to fight our court case for us. We have to just get our own energy moving with the